Hi, Wilita. Good to hear from you that you're a little bit more interested in what's going on here with me. So I'm glad, well, actually, I'm not glad that your cholesterol high, but at least it kind of gave you a little red flag that, we need to start taking care of ourselves a little bit better. So right now we're talking about obesity in our class, and it kind of correlates with the whole cholesterol and fats that we were talking about. So the more fats you have, the more prone we're going to be to being obese sometimes that we see. So you may have noticed there's a couple members in our family that are obese, along with yourself. That's probably due to genetic reasons. It's a predisposition in our family probably to be um, a little bit on the heavier side. And this kind of has been seen in studies with twins, identical twins. So usually identical twins are gonna end up having some of the same weight. So they're either going to be heavier together or lighter together. And this actually is a little bit strongly correlated in twins that, or you see a strong correlation of what's going on in twins in genetic purposes in twins that were separated at birth or close to birth. They're identical twins and they both led two different lives with two different families. When they came together at later ages like 40s or 50s, they started seeing, hey, we have some of the same weight, and that kind of tells you maybe the family may have had an influence, but most likely could have been a genetic factor in there. There's also been studies with identical twins that kind of either force fed them a lot or they ate a lot plus they exercise and they start seeing weight gains or loss, uh, especially in particular areas like the stomach or something, very similar among the twins. So that kind of tells you, there's some genetic factors going on in there. But there's also not just genetic factors in that sense. There's also genetic mutations that can be occurring. One of the well, not common. One of the one that kind of seen a lot in people, at least in small populations, are called melanocortin 4 receptor genes. If there's an error in that one gene, they kind of saw in that population that they were a little bit more likely to be obese. But apart from genetic factors, we also have some hormonal factors. One of them is going to be ghrelin and leptin. They kind of do opposite of each other. I think it's called ghrelin. It sounds like gremlin. Ghrelin is a hunger gene. So right before you're about to eat, you're actually expressing a lot more ghrelin, and it's kind of telling your body, "Hey, you need to eat." Um, and you kind of want the opposite effect once you're eating or kind of getting close to eating. You want to tell your body, hey, we're not hungry anymore, we need to stop eating. That's the hormone called leptin. Leptin is going to do the opposite effect of ghrelin. So in sometimes obese people, we're going to see that ghrelin is not being suppressed. There's something wrong. So they're kind of being told, or their body's telling them, hey, you need it. You're still hungry or something because they still have ghrelin in their system. So that's another hormonal factor. Another one is that in obese people, we start seeing more insulin, uh, a higher insulin increase. And what insulin does is basically is telling your body you have too much sugar in your blood system. We need to kind of put that in your cells to store it for when we actually need it. So when you store it, you're gonna store sugar, the glucose molecule, into glycogen. Um, this is basically a longer sugar molecule that's kind of attached together. And the reason why this all does that is because if you have a lot of glucose separate, you're going to have a lot of water attracted around each glucose. So you might end up having actually a larger volume. Glycogen ends up kind of reducing that volume and basically packs it a little bit more in the cell. Apart from that, you can also start producing a lot more fat. And when we're trying to lose weight and stuff like that, we don't want that fat. And actually, for women, we have another factor going on, estrogen. Estrogen, if you notice, women end up being lighter than men sometimes, and that's because estrogen kind of tells women a little bit more of suppressing hunger. So you're not going to eat as much as a guy. In menopause, we're going to start seeing the opposite effect. We start losing estrogen, and so we start seeing women in menopause being a little bit more heavier than what they used to be, and that's because they're not getting that same signal that's telling them, hey, we need to stop eating, or we need to not eat as much as we have. So those are factors that kind of involved obesity. But we also have some factors that we can also influence on ourselves that we can do by exercising. So if we exercise, we're gonna help our body start burning some of that fat. Um, and so if we start burning a little bit more fat, it's gonna help us reduce some of our obesity. If we don't eat as much, that's also gonna help out with our obesity. Um, like I said, sometimes it's hard, but it's something that we got to do. We got to fight for, because we want to prevent and make sure we prevent all those obesity related diseases. We have heart attack, heart disease, diabetes sometimes that goes with it, and shadowing a neuro. It's called a neurosurgeon. I ended up seeing a lot more spinal issues than brain surgeries, and that's mostly because the obesity kind of cause a lot of pressure in their back, and they kind of have to adjust their spinal cord a little bit. But yeah, I hope to hear you from you soon. I hope you learned a little bit more about obesity and how it's kind of worked out in the body. All right, see you next time, Grandma.